AITA for refusing to spend my savings to bail out my sibling from debt. Alright, here we go. I'm a guy in my mid-30s, and I've worked hard over the years to build up a little bit of financial security for myself. I'm not rolling in cash, but I'm proud of what I've managed to save. I don't live lavishly, but I live comfortably. My job pays well enough that I don't have to stress about bills, but I've been careful to make sure I'm not spending more than I bring in. I drive an older car, live in a modest apartment, and save what I can each month. On the other hand, there's my sibling, Alex. Alex and I grew up in the same house, same parents, but somewhere along the way, we took very different approaches to money. Where I've always been more frugal, Alex has always been a bit of a live-for-today kind of person. Over the years, I watched as they got a brand new car financed, of course, with a hefty monthly payment, went on fancy vacations they couldn't really afford, and picked up the latest tech gadgets every time a new one came out. I used to make a comment here or there, lightly suggesting that maybe they should start putting a little away for emergencies, but Alex always brushed it off. "I'll worry about it later," they'd say, or "I deserve to treat myself once in a while." Honestly, I stopped saying anything eventually, because it was clear they didn't want to hear it. Fast forward a few years, and I get a message from Alex out of the blue. I'm immediately hit with a sense of dread. It's not just a "hey, what's up" kind of message. It's this huge paragraph about how they're in trouble and need my help. They go on about how their finances have completely spiraled out of control and they're buried in debt. Apparently, over the past few years, they've been relying on credit cards and loans to maintain their lifestyle. What started as a few emergency purchases, and I'm skeptical about the term emergency here, snowballed into tens of thousands in debt. Now, creditors are breathing down their neck, sending letters, calling nonstop. They're in full-blown panic mode and, apparently, I'm their only hope. Now, here's the kicker. Alex wasn't asking for a small loan to help with a few bills. No, they were asking me to clear out nearly all of my savings to pay off their debt entirely. They made it sound like this was the only way they could start fresh and that anything less would leave them struggling for years. When I read that, my heart dropped. I could barely believe it. This wasn't just a few $100 to help them through a rough patch. They wanted me to basically drain the safety net I'd spent years building up. Also, they could wipe the slate clean from their own mistakes. I tried to be empathetic. I didn't immediately shoot them down, even though my gut reaction was pure disbelief. Instead, I suggested some other options, hoping to point them in a direction that didn't involve me losing everything I'd worked for. I mentioned things like debt consolidation, maybe talking to a financial advisor, or even setting up a payment plan with their creditors. I even offered to sit down with them and go over their finances, helping them create a budget so they could start tackling this on their own. But they shot down every idea I had, saying it would take too long or that it wouldn't be enough. They were adamant that I was their only real option. And then the guilt tripping started. Alex told me that families should help each other out, and they claimed that if the roles were reversed, they'd do the same for me without a second thought. They said I was being selfish and greedy for not wanting to help them get out of this mess. At this point, I was getting pretty frustrated. Here I was, trying to offer practical, realistic solutions, and they were making me out to be some kind of villain because I didn't want to just hand over my entire savings. I thought it would end there, but it didn't. Somehow, Alex managed to get our parents involved. My phone started ringing off the hook with calls from my mom and dad. Both of them telling me that family is more important than money and that I should do this because I'm the responsible one. They said that Alex was at rock bottom and that it was my duty, as the responsible sibling, to help them get back on their feet. My parents aren't exactly in a position to help financially, so they saw me as the only viable option. The calls kept coming. My mom would say things like, "You know how hard this has been on Alex. Just imagine if you were in their shoes." My dad chimed in too, saying, "This is what family is for. Money comes and goes, but family is forever." I can tell they're genuinely worried about Alex, and I get it, they're scared for their child. But it feels like they're turning me into the bad guy here, simply because I don't want to empty my bank account for a problem I didn't create. I tried explaining my side of things, that it's not just about money. It's about the security I've built for myself, the peace of mind knowing I have something to fall back on if things ever go south in my own life. I told them that I'm more than willing to help Alex, just not in the way they're demanding. I even offered to help cover a few of Alex's monthly payments while they get things sorted, or to lend a smaller amount to help with immediate expenses. But apparently, that's not good enough. Alex wants the whole amount, all at once, so they can start fresh, and they've convinced my parents that I'm the only one standing in the way of that happening. The pressure has been relentless. I'm getting calls every day, sometimes multiple times a day, with someone, either Alex or one of my parents, telling me that I'm choosing money over family and making me feel like I'm some heartless monster for not wanting to sacrifice everything I've worked for. They're making it sound like if I really loved them, if I really cared about Alex, I'd do this without question. And that's just wrong. I do love my family. I care about Alex, but this isn't just a minor favor they're asking for. This is my entire safety net. Now I'm torn. I feel like no matter what I do, I'm going to be the bad guy. If I don't give Alex the money, my family will see me as selfish and cold-hearted, like I'm turning my back on them. But if I give in, if I drain my savings to pay off Alex's debts, I'm the one left vulnerable. I'm the one who loses the security I've spent years building. And who's to say that Alex won't just end up in the same situation again a few years down the line? I mean, they've shown me exactly how they handle money, and I have no reason to believe that they'll suddenly become financially responsible overnight. So here I am wondering if I'm in the wrong for saying no. Am I really being selfish for wanting to protect what I've worked for? Or am I right to hold my ground and refuse to clean up a mess I had no part in creating? AITA, because honestly, the way my family is acting, I'm starting to feel like maybe I am a bad person for not helping out. But at the same time, I can't shake this feeling that their problems shouldn't have to be mine just because I was responsible with my money. Update 1. Alright, so I left off with my parents and Alex pressuring me to drain my savings for Alex's debt, with both of them treating me like the cold-hearted, selfish sibling because I wasn't immediately willing to throw away everything I'd built. I thought the guilt trips and emotional manipulation were as bad as it was going to get, but then Alex hit me with something else. Something I never could have seen coming. A few days after my parents' last round of guilt-laden calls, Alex shows up at my apartment, unannounced. I open the door, and right away I can tell they're here to talk about the debt situation again. They look desperate, sure, but there's something else there, a kind of entitlement that I just wasn't prepared for. I thought maybe they were here to apologize, or to at least acknowledge that I'd already offered more support than most siblings would. But no. Instead, they hit me with this line: "Why don't you just give me all your savings to pay off the debt?" When they said that, I was floored. It wasn't like they asked for a loan, or suggested we come to some kind of compromise. They were asking me, with a completely straight face, to just hand over everything. And the kicker. They said it like it was the most obvious solution in the world. "It's not that difficult," they said, as if I'd just been stubbornly refusing to see some simple, logical answer this whole time. I was honestly so shocked I didn't even know what to say at first. After I picked my jaw up off the floor, I reminded them that I'd suggested several options, things that didn't involve me draining every cent I'd worked so hard to save. I pointed out that I'd been trying to help them find a way to deal with this responsibly for years, that I'd warned them time and time again to be smarter with their money. I told them they needed to be cautious about their spending and avoid racking up debt they couldn't handle. Every time, they'd brush me off, saying they'd figure it out. Now here they were, telling me that the solution was for me to just sacrifice everything I'd worked for so they could hit the reset button. But Alex didn't see it that way. They actually had the nerve to tell me that if I gave up my savings, it would mean we could both start fresh. They painted this picture of a new beginning, one where they wouldn't have the burden of debt, and where they could finally get their life back on track. And the kicker. They told me that I was good with money, that I knew how to handle finances, so I'd be able to rebuild my savings in no time. In their mind, this was a win-win situation. They'd get a clean slate, and I'd be able to use my financial skills to just rebuild everything I was being asked to throw away. I could feel my frustration building, but I tried to keep my cool. I asked, as calmly as I could manage, if they'd ever considered doing the same thing for me if the roles were reversed. Their answer, a casual "of course not." They said it with a straight face, like this was just a given, as if it made perfect sense that I should be willing to empty my bank account for them, but they wouldn't even think of doing the same for me. They went on to explain that we're family, and family is supposed to help each other without expecting anything in return. According to them, this wasn't about lending or borrowing money, this was just what family is supposed to do. The irony was unreal. I mean, here they were, using the family card to try and manipulate me into a massive financial sacrifice they wouldn't even consider making if the tables were turned. I tried to reason with them, to make them understand that this wasn't just a matter of writing a check and moving on. This was my entire safety net, my hard-earned security. But Alex was already a few steps ahead with their next solution. They suggested that I could take out a loan in my name to cover their debts. Yes, you read that right, they wanted me to borrow money, to take on debt in my name, and then cover the payments myself so that they could be free and clear. At that point, I was beyond stunned. I was actually speechless. Here was my sibling, already asking me to give up everything I'd saved, and now suggesting I should take on new debt in my own name, debt that I'd be on the hook to pay back, just to dig them out of the hole they dug for themselves. It was like they genuinely couldn't comprehend the absurdity of what they were asking. They just kept talking about how this would let them start over and that I'd be able to handle the debt because I was so responsible. I couldn't believe it. It was like all those years of me trying to be there for them, trying to offer advice, trying to set a good example they'd gone completely ignored. I had warned them, repeatedly, that they were playing with fire by piling up debt like this, but it was like they'd never taken a single word of it seriously. And now, their solution was to dump their mess on me and walk away scot-free, leaving me to deal with the consequences. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I realized that this wasn't just about money. This was about respect, or the total lack of it, in this case. Alex didn't respect my hard work, my sacrifices, or the careful decisions I'd made to build up my savings. They saw my financial stability as something they were entitled to, something they could just take for themselves without a second thought. They didn't see me as a person with my own goals, my own needs, my own fears. I was just a bank account to them, a safety net they felt entitled to use. I finally told them, flat out, that there was no way I was going to give them my savings or take out a loan for them. I reminded them, probably for the 100th time, that I'd offered to help in other ways. But I also made it clear that I wasn't going to sacrifice my financial future for a situation that was entirely of their own making. I told them I loved them, that I wanted them to be okay, but that they needed to take responsibility for their own life and their own choices. That was the last straw. Alex stormed out, saying they couldn't believe how selfish I was, how I was putting money before family. They told me I'd regret this, that someday I'd understand how cruel I was being. And they left, slamming the door behind them, leaving me standing there, still in shock from everything that had just gone down. Since then, the calls from my parents have only gotten worse. They keep telling me how disappointed they are, how Alex is struggling, how I'm the only one who can help. But I've held firm. I'm not going to ruin my own financial stability because my sibling can't face the consequences of their own actions. And yeah, maybe that makes me the bad guy in their eyes, but I can't help feeling like this is a line I need to draw for my own sanity and my own sense of self-respect. So, I guess that's where I am now. I'm the selfish sibling, the cold-hearted one who won't bankrupt himself to fix a problem he didn't create. But honestly, if that's what it means to stand up for myself, to protect what I've worked for, then so be it. I'll take the title. Update 2. Not long after that explosive confrontation with Alex, the weight of the situation began to settle in, though it didn't fully dissipate. I thought about my sibling more often than I wanted to admit, wondering how they were coping. I felt bad for them, really, but the whole thing had been exhausting, emotionally draining. My parents continued to pressure me, trying to convince me that I was being unreasonable and that I should just help Alex out. They insisted that family comes first, that I could help Alex get back on his feet, and that I was being cruel for not supporting my own blood. Each call was like another brick added to my mental load. Then, a few weeks later, I remembered it was Alex's birthday. I hesitated before I picked up the phone to call. I wanted to reach out and acknowledge the day, if only to show that despite everything, I still cared. I wanted to believe that some semblance of family remained between us, even after the chaos of the past few weeks. So I dialed the number and waited as the phone rang, half expecting that Alex might not even answer. When they finally picked up, The tone was flat. I could hear a mix of surprise and indifference in their voice. I went through the motions, wishing them a happy birthday, reminding them that they deserved a special day despite everything going on in their life. I could almost feel the awkwardness radiating through the phone line. There was a moment of silence before Alex replied. Then came the question that caught me off guard. Is that all? I paused, trying to wrap my head around what they meant. I felt a little unease creeping in. I asked for clarification, wanting to understand why it felt like there was an expectation hanging in the air. Alex's response was as bold as it was shocking. They asked if I didn't want to correct my mistake by giving them my savings as a birthday present. At that moment, I felt a rush of disbelief wash over me. I was astonished. I had just wished them well and thought that was a simple, kind gesture, yet here they were, circling back to the very issue that had caused our earlier confrontation. I insisted again that I hadn't made any mistakes and I had no intention of giving my savings to them. I could feel the tension creeping back into my shoulders, a familiar tightness that had become all too common lately. Alex didn't respond, just hung up without so much as another word. I felt a knot form in my stomach. The frustration was building again, this time mixed with a sense of sadness. It was becoming painfully clear to me that Alex's expectations had shifted dramatically, and they weren't seeing the situation for what it really was. In the days that followed, I kept expecting a follow-up call or message from Alex, maybe a moment of clarity, some realization that they needed to face their reality. But that call never came. Instead, I got a strange sense of quiet. I was left wondering if perhaps Alex was really taking time to figure things out on their own. Then, about a week after their birthday, I got a surprising update through one of our mutual friends. Apparently, Alex had finally taken some steps toward addressing their financial mess. They reached out to a financial expert, someone who specialized in debt management. I felt a mix of relief and disbelief. It was almost as if the news had reached me too late after the damage had been done in our relationship. As the details unfolded, I learned that Alex was actually working with this expert to develop a strategy to pay off their debts. They were taking the steps I had tried to guide them toward all along. They were looking at consolidating loans, negotiating with creditors, and creating a budget that could help them stabilize their finances. I was impressed and felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was the turning point Alex needed. However, the path wasn't without its hurdles. I found out that Alex had to sell several expensive items to make this work. It was a significant sacrifice, things they'd once considered essential to their lifestyle or status. Part of me wanted to reach out again, to offer my support in whatever way I could. After all, it was good to hear they were finally taking responsibility, and I could see that they were learning the hard way about the consequences of their financial choices. But then I remembered the conversation we had before. I couldn't shake the feeling that even now, Alex expected me to be involved in some way to carry some of that burden. I heard about how they initially resisted selling some of their nicer belongings because they wanted me to be the one to make everything okay. They seemed to think that since I was the responsible one, I should be helping them, even if that meant more financial sacrifice on my part. All of this was happening while my parents continued to wade in with their thoughts. They felt Alex's struggles were evidence that I should have just given my savings to help them avoid this situation altogether. They reiterated their belief that families should help each other without question. My parents had taken to framing it like I was a disappointment, that I was somehow failing Alex by not being the safety net they wanted me to be. Their comments about family duty echoed in my mind, making the already complex emotions surrounding this situation even more challenging. Eventually, the updates trickled in from friends. It turned out that Alex was slowly starting to get a grip on their finances. They had learned to budget better and were making progress in paying off their debts, even if it meant making sacrifices along the way. I felt a sense of pride, albeit tinged with sadness. I had hoped that through all of this, they'd realize that family doesn't mean blindly throwing your financial future away for someone else. It meant being there for one another in healthier ways, even when that meant letting go. I thought a lot about what it meant to be part of a family, especially one that had expectations about loyalty and support. I'd always been the one who believed in personal accountability, the idea that everyone has to face the music for their choices. I could only hope that eventually, Alex would come to terms with that, too. As they began to tackle their challenges head-on, I hoped they'd also understand the value of standing on their own 2 feet, rather than leaning on others in a way that could ultimately harm us both.